My name is Jin Young-jin. I'm the Director of Culture Program at the Charles B. Wang Center, Stony Brook University in New York. The Charles B. Wang Center was the first host of the Check거리 exhibition last fall, and I'm honored to be here to introduce three presenters for session 3, which is entitled Case Studies of Korean Painted Screens. Last year, we were extremely honored at the Wang Center to host a rare collection of traditional Korean screens. The theme of knowledge, power, and change that Check거리 screen carries with them were the one we were eager to share with the American audience. And Spencer Museum of Art is fortunate to have already received in hand very timely published exhibition catalog, which was co-published by Dahal Media in Korea and SUNY Press in New York. The Charles B. Wang Center has also commenced the exhibition publication process, but unfortunately we didn't have it during our exhibition. So I think that being a first is not always good when it deals with the publication. So congratulations again for to the Spencer Museum of Art. So this afternoon, Dr. Marshall Hoffler, Professor of Art History at the University of Kansas, will present a talk entitled Joseon Screen Painting of Pyongyang. I'm sure that no words are needed to introduce Dr. Hoffler to the audience here today, but let me briefly introduce Dr. Hoffler for the benefit of our international audience members. Dr. Hoffler received her PhD in History of Art at University of California in Berkeley, and she has been a professor of art history since 1996 at KU here. And in 2010, Dr. Hoffler became Associate Dean for International and Interdisciplinary Studies. And during her career, she has cultivated many East Asian art historians. And in 2013, Dr. Hoffler was a leading figure in pursuit of a Korea Foundation grant to create a Korean art history professor position here at the University of Kansas. Our second speaker, Dr. Kris Ercums, is a curator of Asian art and global contemporary art at the Spencer Museum of Art. He will present a talk entitled Rediscovering a Treasure, Ziyi's Enjoyment of Life, a Banquet screen in the collection of Spencer Museum of Art. And prior to joining the Spencer, Dr. Ercums lived in Beijing, China, where he conducted research for his University of Chicago dissertation entitled Exhibiting Modernity National Art Exhibition in China during the early Republican period from 1911 to 1937. In 2009, Dr. Ercums was awarded a curatorial research fellowship from Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Art in New York, which funded 2 years of research on contemporary art across Asia, which was fundamental to his exhibition entitled Temporal Turn, Art and Speculation in Contemporary Asia. And our third presenter, Dr. Sooa McCormick, is Assistant Curator of Korean Art at Cleveland Museum of Art. And Dr. McCormick will present Taste of Distinction paintings of scholars Accoutrements. Dr. McCormick holds a PhD from University of Kansas, so this session is a KU session, basically. Her dissertation was entitled Comparative and Cross-Cultural Perspectives on Chinese and Korean Court Documentary Painting in the 18th Centuries. And prior to joining the Cleveland Museum of Art in 2015, Dr. McCormick was a visiting professor at Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, and she also participated in a number of translation projects with the National Museum of Art and Palace Museum and Neum Samsung Museum of Art. So without further ado, please welcome our three presenters.
So in 2015, during an extensive renovation of the Spencer Museum of Art, I was able to inspect contents of several storage cabinets that had been blocked for years. And inside one, I found a tattered, broken screen on which was attached a handwritten note that read, Festivities in festivities, is that? Yes. In honor of an ancestor with 1,000 descendants by a Korean artist. Copies of this picture are customarily given as a marriage present. Upon reading the note, my heartbeat quickened, especially because in the 10 years I had worked at the Spencer, I had never come across any record of a Korean screen in the collection. As my intern and I began to assemble the screen, which we discovered was broken into several pieces, we began to see this wonderful image unfold that was indeed festivities in honor of an ancestor with 1,000 descendants. And it was definitely by a Korean artist, we figured. But despite the frayed condition, the screen and the quality of the painting was undiminished. And as I looked at it, I felt my excitement grow as I was an attendant, as if I was attending this lavish banquet unfolding before my eyes. I recognized that the mysterious ancestor alluded in the note was Guo Ziyi, who had loyally served 4 emperors of the Tang dynasty and who was a popular subject for screens made in Korea during the 19th century. During Guo's imminent military career, he famously retook the Tang capital of Chang'an from the rebel commander Shi Siming and proved to be the military might behind the Tang imperial throne during the ensuing Anshi rebellion in the late 700s. In later times, the noted Song dynasty historian Sima Guang lauded the general, remarking that his contributions to the preservation of the Tang Empire were enormous. For his unwavering loyalty and heroic military accomplishments, Emperor Shunzong awarded Guo with the honorary title Fenyang Junwang, or Prince of Fenyang, which is why Guo Ziyi is interchangeably referred to as Guo Fenyang or Gwakbunyang in Korean, the name that is used for the Korean screen, the title of the screen most commonly. This is the most common title of the screen in Korean art history. Since the advent of digital records at the museum, the screen had never been inventoried, nor had it been formally accessioned into the collection, so I had to dig into the museum's archives to see if I could find any mention of it. I uncovered a reference to a Korean screen that had been exhibited in the 1930s at the original Spooner Thayer Art Museum at the university in a section devoted to Oriental painting. The type checklist begins, Korean screen, painted, 8-fold screen, a ceremony in the grounds of the king's palace, a description that was spot on for the one I found in storage, and furthermore, the recorded measurements matched exactly. So with this information, I was able to firmly attribute the screen to the founding gift of over 7,000 objects that had been donated to the University of Kansas in 1917 by Kansas City art collector and philanthropist Sally Casey Thayer. In 1907, following the death of her husband, William Bridges Thayer, who had accumulated a sizable fortune as partner of the Emery Bird Thayer dry goods company located in downtown Kansas City, Mrs. Thayer focused her energies and income on forming a diverse collection of art. While her interests varied, Asian art was one of Mrs. Thayer's principal passions, as seen in this assemblage of Japanese and Chinese sculptures displayed at the opening of the Spooner Thayer Art Museum in 1926. The Thayer collection included a number of Korean works of art collected at the turn of the 20th century that we plan to include in a major exhibition slated for 2017 titled Civic Leader and Art Collector, Sally Casey Thayer, and an Art Museum for KU, so that will be the centennial of the gift. So a few years ago, a generous gift from the Overseas Korean Cultural Heritage Foundation funded the conservation of the Spencer's Guo Ziyi screen that was completed by Professor Park Chi-sun. And in December 2016, the conserved screen was featured in a special exhibition of Guo Ziyi banquet screens from U.S. collections titled The Wish to Live a Happy Life at the National Palace Museum. So here we go. We can see it before its conservation. And then this is the recently conserved. So for the remainder of my time today, I want to briefly introduce the life and legacy and visual representation of Guo Ziyi in Chinese visual culture, and then turn my discussion to how these visual developments relate to the Spencer Museum's Guo Ziyi screen, and conclude by discussing the social context for Guo Ziyi screens in 19th century Joseon Korea, and how these screens were used. And while I will end by speculating on the origins of the Spencer's screen. So in addition to his valiant defense of the Tang Empire, General Guo also led successful military expeditions against the Uyghur kingdom, and which was immortalized in this late 11th century hand scroll. Guo Ziyi receives homage of the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs were pastoral nomads in the northwest that had supported the Tang Empire by providing military assistance during the aforementioned Anshi Rebellion. However, due to a diplomatic scuffle, the Uyghurs realigned themselves with the Tibetan kingdom, who were threatening to once again invade the Tang capital of Chang'an. Li Gonglin's hand scroll illustrates how Guo Ziyi valiantly approached the Uyghur army unarmed, an act of bravery that so impressed the Uyghur commander he once again pledged his allegiance to the Tang Empire. The flowing continuity of action rendered in baimiao, or plain drawing, that Li Gonglin used to depict Guo Ziyi was also used in a later painting by Yuan Dynasty painter Wang Zhenpeng. That is the earliest textually attested representation of Guo Ziyi surrounded by his family. Titled Image of the Family Celebration of Prince Fenyang, a description of the painting, which is no longer extant, is recorded in a late 18th century Qing Dynasty catalog that gives us a sense of the composition of the painting. But due to time, I really can't go into that today. Later paintings, like this one in the University of Michigan Art Museum, called Three Abundant Blessings, show a kind of become a typical way of showing Guo Ziyi in the Chinese context. The three abundant blessings that are mentioned in the painting are wealth, as seen in the lavish amenities of his comfortable life, longevity, represented by the general's white hair, and happiness, embodied by Guo's plentiful male offspring. The celebratory scene in Wang Yingxiang's painting takes place after Guo had left military service and was ensconced in the idyllic comfort of retirement. By the year 781, when Guo died at the venerable age of 84, he had been blessed with 8 sons and 7 son-in-laws, all of whom occupied high official posts. For his repute as the progenitor of innumerable offspring, Emperor Dezong, Tang Emperor Dezong, posthumously declared Guo Ziyi father of the realm. And eventually, Guo's association with numerous sons and grandsons earned him a legendary place in the pantheon of Chinese folk religion as the god of happiness, as seen here in this temple carving. So you have the god of longevity and the god of prosperity. But Guo Ziyi was not only depicted in Chinese folk religion. It was a common scene. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. This is a piece from the Spencer's Museum's collection that also we discovered in storage that had been misattributed, which is a Chinese depiction of Guo Ziyi's birthday celebration. And so we'll take a moment to look at it a little bit more closely. Originally I had thought maybe because it was divided into 10 hanging scrolls, maybe it at one time was a screen too, but now I'm beginning to doubt that. So, because it was very common just to have large screens like this in the Qing period. So we can look at it very closely, and it's very interesting how closely it matches the earlier Yuan Dynasty painting that is only recorded in the Qing records. So it begins with this group of horses at the gates, And then it kind of goes into the inner courtyards where you see the women kind of attending children, kind of little naughty children sometimes, playing. And then in the middle, you have Guo Ziyi surrounded by his grandsons. But what's interesting is that you don't find all of his 15 sons and son-in-laws sort of gathered like you'll see in a moment in the Korean version. But really you have, they're kind of scattered all throughout the composition. And then the scroll sort of ends with this woman that I had thought maybe was Guo Ziyi's wife, but looking back at the earlier descriptions, I probably think now that this is actually Princess Shenping, who was married to one of Guo's oldest sons. That's just because of her youth and being attended by this feather fan. So the life and legacy of Guo Ziyi was not restricted to the visual arts, but was also frequently enacted in widely popular dramatizations that valorized his heroic historic figure as a role model for achieving the pinnacle of success and happiness in Chinese culture. Among the earliest dramatic adaptations of Guo Ziyi's life was the late Ming period Sanxi opera titled Countless Scepters on the Bed, which was based on a story from a Tang period compilation, Records Prompted by Conversations. As seen in this Chinese New Year print, from the early 19th century, in this opera, Guo Ziyi scolds his son Guo Ai by beating him with a stick for upsetting his son's wife, the Princess Shenping, daughter of the Tang Emperor Daizong. In turn, this opera morphed into popular Cantonese operas, one called The Taming of the Princess, and another which was frequently performed in South China was the birthday celebration of Guo Ziyi. So it's actually the same topic as the painting. So building on this introduction, so also you find Guo Ziyi, there's another screen in the Spencer's collection, this Coromandel screen, a lacquer screen, that also depicts Guo Ziyi. And it really corresponds fairly well to the written records. And you can see in the middle, you have Guo Ziyi as well, and and they have this dance going on that we'll find in the Gukbanyang Korean screen in a moment. So building on this introduction to the rich and varied representation of Guo Ziyi in Chinese visual culture, let us now turn to a closer examination of the Spencer's recently conserved screen as a way of discerning how these screens were used in Joseon period society. At the center of the screen, in the fourth panel from the left, is the bearded Guo Ziyi seated on a daybed, surrounded by his playing children and his numerous sons and daughters who have gathered to watch a dancer with long sleeves perform. The spatial organization of the screen is very distinct. On the right side, presided by Guo's wife, is the feminine spaces. Pretty much only women are depicted on the right side, whereas on the left side we see male pursuits like men playing baduk, which is one of the kind of four arts of the gentleman. And then surrounded by it, you see painted these blue and green landscapes, which were often used to evoke Taoist paradise, or even kind of the golden age of deep antiquity, which would be in keeping with the Tang dynasty, the time during which Guo lived. And the auspiciousness of the banquet is further accentuated by all of these pairings of conjugal animals, like peacocks and cranes, and you can even see like the little deer at the bottom of the screen down there. So in 19th century Korea, Guo Ziyi's screens became extremely popular as they encapsulated the very Confucian virtues and principles upon which Joseon-era Korean society was built. As seen in this photograph from 1906, taken on the occasion of the 60th birthday of the wife of a wealthy merchant, we could see Guo Ziyi's screen in the background. It's maybe a little difficult to see, but on the left-hand side is a Guo Ziyi screen in the back. And so this was the similar context that how they were often used in China as kind of birthday celebrations. But at the Joseon court, we see a different way that they're used. And so when the conservation was being done, the conservator actually discovered that the backing paper, which was used, recycled material, they were all tax documents from the land outside of Seoul. So that's one kind of part of my case that I'm going to make in just a minute. If we look at even the royal documents that are used that document how these Guo Ziyi screens were used at the Joseon court, like this one, the Protocols of Superintendency for Royal Wedding Ceremonies, which is dated to 1802. It's the first documented use of a Gokbunyang or Guo Ziyi screen at the Joseon court. Was displayed in the bridal pavilion of the detached palace for the royal wedding of King Sunjo and Queen Sunwan. And Lee Sung-mi points out that Guo Ziyi theme appeared at approximately the same time when a novel on that theme was also published in Hangul for the first time. And then the recent wonderful dissertation by Yeonjun Soo from UCLA, who was Professor Youngman's student, shows that these screens were used in what she characterizes as a kind of feminine space or female space in which the queen-to-be or the crown princess stayed until the wedding day. Thus, the intended viewership of Guo Ziyi screens made at court was women. And then one other really interesting piece that came together as the conservation was being done is if we look at the description in the Ugwe, did I say that okay? Is that the description of it? So you have this painting adornment or huizhuang that it's right here. Lines it on the outside, and so the virtue of it never being discovered or being disturbed while it was at the Spencer was that it had never been touched basically since it was made in the 19th century. And then it also the other strips, these hongxie, this red support strip, was also intact, as well as this white support strip, which completely matched the description of how the mounting should look according to the court documents. And from that, we can speculate that probably the Spencer's screen was a palace production and might have even been used at some royal wedding ceremony. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm so great to be back home. I feel Lawrence is my second home. My name is Sooa McCormick. I'm an assistant curator of Korean art at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And I'm gonna focus back on Chekgari tradition. And my focus of the presentation is Chekkado painting. It's a sub-genre of Chekgari. Chekkado refers to the painting that books and things are displayed in compartmentalized bookshelf. A typical iconography of repertoire of Chekkado, another example of Chekkado, that bookshelf type. A typical iconographic repertoire of Chekkado can be seen in a 10-panel folding screen that Cleveland Museum of Art acquired in 2011. along with multiple volumes of books and variety of soft objects ranging from scholarly utensils to antiquities are displayed on the covers. While many checkado screens are painted by different hands, their iconography is more or less the same. Such a conventionality suggests the typical checkado was not a pictorial representation of a specific collector's bookshelf, but rather a standardized assortment of collectibles governed by a specific ideas or aesthetics, very much likely proposed or endorsed by their patrons. Professor Berlin Jungmann stated in her book Pathway to Korean Art that checkari are particularly important, not only because they are firmly rooted in royal court art, but also later on they became one of the most popular genre of minhwa, or we can translate folk art or popular art. Such a hierarchical artistic transmission, poses a special challenge in deciphering the iconography which continued to evolve in correspondence with the patron's distinctive taste and needs. However, since early 20th century Minge or folk crafts movement, which defined all of the Korean polychrome paintings as a folk art, checkari's iconography came to examined solely under the lens of folk or popular art. So this is the popular type. That comparison to the checkado, mainly by court painters. Since many popular arts in East Asia tended to employ a language of auspicious symbolism, checkari's iconography was understood chiefly as the assemblage of auspicious symbols, evoking ideas of longevity, fertility, and prosperity. In the course of archival research on royal documents, this is very popular slide. The movie failed, but the audience were very fascinated with the actors' six-pack muscles in the movie. The Korean scholars such as Kang Kwan-sik have discovered that many polychrome paintings, including checkado, were initially commissioned for elite ruling classes, the king, the royal court members, court officials, aristocrats, and scholars. Korean art historians such as Hwang Jung-yeon and Jang Jin-sung thoroughly researched the importation of late Ming Chinese books on art and connoisseurship and their significant impact on collectors' activities as well as the art scene in late 18th and 19th century Korea. Nevertheless, the views that sees checkari as the assemblage of auspicious symbolism is still persistent, partially persistent in current scholarship. It is correct to say the language of auspicious symbolism certainly is the primary mode of popular type checkari screen, but it may not be the one and only dominant mode that governs the iconographic repertoire of checkado, since its prototype was originated in the late 18th century Korean royal court by King Jeongjo. Thus, I would like to propose we may take a more nuanced approach to reading checkado's repertoire. In my research, by focusing on the iconographic program of Cleveland screen and comparing it with other similar examples, I immediately noticed that certain groups of objects repeatedly make their appearance. Such specific objects and their grouping, in fact, cannot be seen in popular type screens. And furthermore, objects displayed in Doabago or Qing period furniture or its pictorial, Doabago's pictorial representation, both of them often painted this Doabago or its pictorial representation are often pointed as a prototype of checkado, but are quite different. Their objects painted or displayed are quite different from what we see in checkado screens. The objects repeatedly painted on checkado, in fact, appear to be more similar to those represented in late Ming figure paintings, such as Chen Hongsho's or Du Jin's works. And the Du Jin's work on the right, you can actually see some of the gawares and also the low incense burner that we can often call shanda type, also the bronze vessels. Also, the 10-panel 10 bamboo studio, an early 17th century painting manual, extremely influential to not only to Chinese painters but also Korean collectors, scholars, and painters, introduced books and antiquities, including bronze vessels, also of certain types of flowers, are objects called pure presentation, 진공. So I will introduce what kind of things repeatedly appear in checkado. One of the most frequently painted objects are incense burner and its accompanying accessories. According to late Ming books on connoisseurship, incense accoutrements were regarded as essential items of scholars' life. Late Junxiang Bajian, 8 treatises on the nurturing of life, a late Ming period Chinese text widely read by Korean collectors in late Joseon period. The author, Gao Lian, recommended certain types of incense burner for scholars' studio. As you can notice, the ding type or also some other root type, and those are especially fang ding are often painted in checkado screen. And those types of incense burner are considered to be elegant types of incense burners. Another late Ming text of Cao Pan Yu Shi, dissertatory notes on furnishing of the studio of a retired scholar, praises incense as the most beneficial of useful things. The author contends that it has the capacity to raise the spirit, foster concentration, promote sleep, and even put lovers in the mood for romance. So you can see here that you see the, and also you see this, oh, sorry. Yes. Considering how widely 3 friends of incense were accepted as a scholarly objects, appropriate for decorating the scholar's studio by the late Ming period, it is not surprising to see them not only late Ming and Qing period scholars' portraits, also in Jerome's presentation, we also saw them in the imperial portraits as a part of background, and also the semi-heroic paintings. But also that they explain why they appeared in a checkado that depict the scholars' elegant, tasteful bookshelves. Crackle glazed stonewares vases are also frequently painted in checkado, yet not so much in popular type screens. The greenish-gray glazes with crackle patterns known as the guan or gawares are some of the most prized objects among Korean collectors in late Joseon period. Testifying to the popularity of guan and gawares, Park Ji-won, a late 18th century scholar collector, advised acquiring example with large cracked eyes patterns in the glaze, warning his readers not to buy small crackled glazes. And in fact, the Jonathan Hay, in his book, that the term, the crackle eyes, it was a late Ming invention. Late Joseon period Korean collectors' predilection for stonewares with crackle eyes glaze were indeed, I believe, greatly indebted to the aesthetics of late Ming connoisseurs. Won Jung-hong defined gawares as the most desirable ceramics for the scholar's studio because they are object of connoisseurship and not convenient for daily usage. And Wien Hongdao, another very famous late Ming scholar, Wien Hongdao strongly condemned the usage of blue and white ceramics for their vulgarity. here that he condemned that those are using the blue and white wares make you look like you are just a beggar but became suddenly rich. It's very showy, very too much showy taste for the scholars. And which is very different that as Professor Pang said, many of the blue and white porcelains appeared in the later popular types of screens. So we obviously know that the patrons and painters that these screens didn't follow that idea of the blue and whites are rather too showy. The famous 18th century Korean scholar Lee Dong-mu, who might have read one of Yen's writings, offered his own explanation why one should use bronze vase or gaware to hold flowers. He stated that if cut flowers are placed in bronze vessels or gawares, they will last for a long time. And also late 16th century scholar Hyun is a little bit earlier than we are discussing now, but he also offered that he really advocate the usage of gaware and also explained furthermore why gaware is very good for storing flowers, because he believed gaware is very much antiquity, so actually observe the energy of the earth. So that somehow the energy earth kept the flower alive. Arranging flowers became important pastime for late Joseon period Korean scholar collectors. And I believe that late Ming period literary aesthetic that promote elegance must have inspired the Chekkado's modes of arranging flowers. In his Jangwoo-ju, the author Won Jung-hong advised to his readers not to mingle more than two types of flowers, because too many flowers together in one vase gives the appearance of cheap wine shop. So never mingle more than two different types of flowers. As you might notice that in Chekkado, you only see a branch of cut flowers held in a bronze vase or gawares. And Won's Jangwoo-ju, in fact, was one of the widely read books among late Joseon period Korean collectors. This may explain why the one on the far left is the detail of the Chekkado that shows the gaware holding a branch of flowers. And then the other two is from the later popular type screens. That why this may explain why a branch of flowers in Chekkado is never mingled with another type of flowers, and why Chekkado flowers are not fully blossomed in contrast to a mixed bouquet of colorful, fully bloomed flowers in popular types. Also, the Won Jung-hong said you never really display the fully blossomed flowers to show. It's always the flowers about to be bloom or just small flowers. And let's move on to the image of fruits and flowers. In East Asian tradition, fruits and flowers tend to be automatically associated with the auspicious symbolism. Narcissus is often interpreted as a symbol of longevity. Pomegranate fruits are associated with fertility and prosperity, and finger citron is emblematic of longevity and wealth. This slide shows that in later popular type screens, multi-seeded fruits such as watermelon, grapes, and eggplants were added with their symbolism related to fertility. And such a new iconographic element certainly tells us the symbolism of auspiciousness truly governed the popular type Chekkari screens. Yet, such a symbolic message may not a single overarching mode for Chekkado screens. I believe a plate of pomegranate, finger citrons, a pot of narcissus may also convey other meanings, more intrinsically related to a scholar's elegant lifestyle. a number of Ming texts on connoisseurship, widely read by late Joseon intellectuals, indicate that narcissus and finger citrons are essential for creating the aromatic, refined environment of the scholar's room. Boncho Gangmu was, for example, dedicated a section to explaining the usage of finger citron. The author encouraged his readers to place them on the top of writing desk, and where they would encourage relaxation and concentration. Also, he advised to be placed together with the minced garlic and finger citron to enhance their sweet aroma. This may explain why finger citrons and narcissus also often appeared in a Ming Qing scholar's portraits, and also some of the erotic paintings where the scholars and beauty have a romantic encounter. That aromatic sense really helped them to in a good mood. There is a possibility that Checkado painting includes such fragrance, fruits, and flowers because they're intimate part of the scholar's life. Narcissus, for example, was one of the most rare but yet popular flowers among scholars, not only for its fragrance but also its poetic implication. In Kim Jung-hee, famous 19th century Korean artist, who composed a number of poems and writings, and he actually compared the narcissus as the doused immortal with pure mind. And I will go move. And another things that I found in the Checkado is that there is a small, the stones that we often call the scholars' rocks, and by the late Ming dynasty, that collecting scholars' rocks, also having a knowledge of our scholars' rocks, is one of the basic things that scholars should have. And in fact, Cheongjo, in his diary, that he expressed how happy that he was when he acquired the Taihu rocks for his desk. Also, at one point, he complained that his court painters didn't know how to realistically portray the texture of Taihu rocks. And also, I will just briefly talk about the usage of customized wooden blocks. This is a very much late Ming practice and never became really popular in Korea. Maybe was popular among very elite, collectors, but it was much more like Chinese practice, that propping the objects over the customized wood pedestals and bases. And then seals. This is like toward the end. Seals are we often, when we talk about the seals in the Checkado screen, is a good way of actually identify who the painter were, and but we kind of didn't go beyond that. But however, in late Joseon period, for late Joseon period Korean intellectuals, seals were not mere objects to claim ownership of paintings or books. For example, 17th century scholar Kim Sang-hun, in his book Gunoksogi, he defined the seals as a medium to express the spirit of antiquity, which allow one to commune with the spirit of sages of the past. And such attitude was very popular, throughout the 19th century. This is the 19th century book called 보소당 인전 that compiled the various types of seals in the collection of King Hanjong's royal collection. Finally, I'd like to share what we found in the preparation of Checkado show as I compare the CMA screen to other signed screens. I came to very close to attribute CMA screen as Lee Taekyun's work, but I was not able to recognize a seal. The seal is there in that round, circle, but then I couldn't really read it. It's just the part was so faded away. The last year, when Overseas Korean Cultural Heritage Foundation research group came, and I asked the photographer, Mr. Seo Hong-gang, to photograph again, and then please make it visible. And then he did it. He did it. So that was like before he did something with the Photoshop, and then he made it open that look, make it more readable. And by then I couldn't still read the inscription, so I sent it to this image to Professor Chung Byung-mo, and then he one day called me. We found it, and your screen's painter is Lee Taek-gyun. So that's our happy ending. And so just summarize my talk. In the material world depicting Chekkado is not a mere physical assemblage of things, but I believe is also a token of to display one's high aesthetic sensibility, sophisticated global consumption, and also literatus pure spirit. Thank you.